This is a Best in Climate episode of Earth Feels, where each week your hosts Rose and Christine read to you from some of the best climate-related blogs and articles on the web.
Rose here for this week's Best in Climate. As a follow-up to our collaborative conversation around the collective feminine's role in planetary healing, today I'd like to address the question, how can the education of girls help solve the climate crisis? And to that end, I'll be reading an excerpt from DRAWDOWN, the book Christine and I have talked about quite a bit, DRAWDOWN, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming, edited by Paul Hawken. And in DRAWDOWN, the meticulous number crunching that's gone on to determine what solutions we already have at our fingertips. The education of girls is the number 6 solution that we already have in our hip pocket. So this excerpt is under the chapter Women and Girls, Educating Girls. Girls' education, it turns out, has a dramatic bearing on global warming. Women with more years of education have fewer, healthier children and actively manage their reproductive health. In 2011, the journal Science published a demographic analysis of the impact of girls' education on population growth. It details a fast-track scenario based on South Korea's actual climb from one of the least to most educated countries in the world. If all nations adopted a similar rate and achieved 100% enrollment of girls in primary and secondary school, by 2050 there would be 843 million fewer people worldwide than if current enrollment rates sustain. According to the Brookings Institution, the difference between a woman with no years of schooling and with 12 years of schooling is almost 4 to 5 children per woman. And it is precisely in those areas of the world where girls are having the hardest time getting educated that population growth is the fastest. In the poorest countries, per capita greenhouse gas emissions are low. People do not have enough energy to properly sanitize their water, read, or study at night, or power their small businesses. There are 1.1 billion people who do not have any electricity at all. From 1/10 of a ton of carbon dioxide per person in Madagascar to 1.8 tons in India, per capita emissions in lower income countries are a fraction of the U.S. rate of 18 tons per person per year. Nevertheless, changes in fertility rates in these countries would have multiple benefits on virtually every level of global society. Nobel laureate and girls' education activist Malala has famously said, quote, "One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world," unquote. An enormous body of evidence supports her conviction. For starters, educated girls realize higher wages and greater upward mobility, contributing to economic growth. Their rates of maternal mortality drop, as do mortality rates of their babies. They are less likely to marry as children or against their will. They have lower incidence of HIV, AIDS, and malaria, the social vaccine effect. Their agricultural plots are more productive, and their families are better nourished. They are more empowered at home, at work, and in society. An intrinsic right, education lays a foundation for vibrant lives for girls and women, their families, and their communities. It is the most powerful lever available for breaking the cycle of intergenerational poverty while mitigating emissions by curbing population growth. A 2010 economic study shows that investment in educating girls is, quote, highly cost competitive with almost all of the existing options for carbon emissions abatement, end quote. Perhaps just $10 per ton of carbon dioxide. Education also shores up resilience in terms of climate change impacts, something the world needs as warming mounts. Across low-income countries, there is a strong link between women and the natural systems at the heart of family and community life. Women often and increasingly play roles as stewards and managers of food, soil, trees, and water. As educated girls become educated women, they can fuse inherited traditional knowledge with new information accessed through the written word. As cycles of change play out in the times to come, new diseases blighting fruit trees, soil composition shifting in garden plots, altered seed sowing times, educated women can marshal multiple ways of knowing to observe, understand, reevaluate, and take action to sustain themselves and those who depend on them. Education also equips women to face the most dramatic climactic changes. A 2013 study found that educating girls, quote, is the single most important social and economic factor associated with a reduction in vulnerability to natural disasters, end quote. The single most important. It is a conclusion drawn from examining the experiences of 125 countries since 1980 and echoes other analyses. Educated girls and women have a better capacity to cope with shocks from natural disasters and extreme weather events, and are therefore less likely to be injured, displaced, or killed when one strikes. This decreased vulnerability also extends to their children, their families, and the elderly. In the past 25 years, the global community has learned a great deal about educating girls. So many challenges impede girls from realizing their right to education, and yet, around the world, they are striving for a place in the classroom. Economic barriers include lack of family funds for school fees and uniforms, as well as prioritizing the more immediate benefits of having girls fetch water or firewood, or work a market stall or plot of land. Cultural barriers encompass traditional beliefs that girls should tend the home rather than learn to read and write, should be married off at a young age, and, when resources are slim, should be skipped over so boys can be sent to school instead. Barriers are also safety-related. Schools that are farther afield put girls at risk of gender-based violence on their way to and from, not to mention dangers and discomforts at school itself. Disability, pregnancy, childbirth, and female genital mutilation also can be obstacles. The barriers are real, but so are the solutions. The most effective approaches concurrently tackle access, school affordability, proximity and suitability for girls, and quality, good teachers and good learning outcomes. Mobilizing communities to support and sustain progress on girls' education is a powerful accelerant. The encyclopedic book, What Works in Girls' Education, maps out 7 areas of interconnected interventions. First, make school affordable. For example, provide family stipends for keeping girls in school. 2, help girls overcome health barriers. For example, offer deworming treatments. 3, reduce the time and distance to get to school. For example, provide girls with bikes. 4, make schools more girl-friendly. For example, offer childcare programs for young mothers. 5, improve school quality. For example, invest in more and better teachers. 6, increase community engagement. For example, train community education activists. 7, sustain girls' education during emergencies. For example, establish schools in refugee camps. Today, 62 million girls are denied the right to attend school. The situation is most dire in secondary classrooms. In South Asia, less than half of girls 16.3 million are enrolled in secondary school. In sub-Saharan Africa, fewer than 1 in 3 girls attends secondary school. And while 75% of all girls start school, just 8% finish their secondary education. Currently, international aid for education projects is about $13 billion annually. Given the link between girls' education and climate change, funds for climate mitigation and adaptation could enable the world to scale solutions rapidly. It could be a powerful match between education's need for funds and the world's need for proven climate solutions. Moreover, synchronizing investments in girls' education with those in family planning would be complementary and mutually reinforcing. Education is grounded in the belief that every life bubbles with innate potential. When it comes to climate change, nurturing the promise of each girl can shape the future for all. The impact of educating girls? 2 solutions influence family size and global population, educating girls and family planning. Because the exact dynamic between these solutions is impossible to determine, our models allocate 50% of the total potential impact to each. We assume these impacts result from 13 years of schooling, including primary through secondary education. According to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, by closing an annual financing gap of $39 billion, universal education in lower middle-income countries can be achieved. It could result in 59.6 gigatons of emissions reduced by 2050. The return on that investment is incalculable. So there you have it. Drawdown places the education of girls as the number 6 solution in counteracting climate change. Again, with the potential of 59.6 gigatons of reduced CO2. So in a world where male-dominated governments may not see the value of economic justice and equality in educating females, perhaps the fact that educating the female population is one of the more cost-effective investments, more so than most green technologies, will finally give every girl access to the classroom. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.
That's this week's episode of Best in Climate for Earth Feels.
Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you